The cafeteria of Maple Row Elementary smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee, and Bianca Crane was working her clipboard like a courtroom exhibit. She had a way of reading names aloud that told you, before she said anything else, exactly how much each name was worth. She reached the bottom of the page and paused, and the pause was the whole performance. Table 12, she read. Grady Holt. Baked goods. A ripple went through the folding chairs. Grady sat near the aisle in his work jacket, sawdust still in the creases of his knuckles, holding the sign-up sheet he had come to confirm. He had been on a roof since 6 that morning. He had washed his hands twice in the school parking lot with a water bottle, and still felt like he had tracked the job site in with him. Bianca smiled, the way people smile when they are about to be unkind and want credit for the smile anyway. Sweetheart, this is really a mom thing. The bake table is sort of the heart of the whole sale. Maybe send napkins, paper plates, something in your lane. A few parents laughed, not all of them, but enough. Grady looked at the sheet in his hands, at his own name written there in a child's careful pencil, and said nothing. His daughter had written it. Table 12, her mother's lucky number. He was not going to explain that to a cafeteria. Bianca let the quiet stretch, then delivered the line she had clearly been saving. Face it, she said, loud enough for the last row of folding chairs. You need a wife for this bake sale. The laughter came again, and he took it the way he took most things, still, with his eyes down, because an 8-year-old was going to hear about this meeting from somebody, and what she heard about her father would matter more than what anyone here thought of him. Then a chair scraped at the back of the room. A woman stood up, coat still on, like she had only meant to stay a minute. Nobody could quite place her. She looked at Bianca and then at Grady, and her voice carried without being raised. I do own an apron, she said. Put me at table 12. Before you go on, guess who she turns out to be, because the answer changes everything about that gymnasium in 3 weeks. Stay with this one until the end. 2 weeks earlier, none of it had happened yet, and Grady Holt was just a man trying to get a permit inspector to call him back. He was 37 years old, and he ran a one-van contracting outfit that carried his last name and all of his savings. He did kitchens, decks, the occasional whole house remodel when the winter was kind. His work was the kind people did not notice, which is how you know it is good. Doors that closed the first time. Floors that did not talk back. The men who worked with him were older than he was, and argued with everybody else on principle and never with him. At 6 in the morning, he was on a ladder. At 3 in the afternoon, he was in the pickup lane at Maple Row, 4th car back, listening to a radio station he did not like because Nora had set the presets, and he could not bring himself to change them. Nora was 8. She came out of the double doors that Tuesday, at a dead run, backpack swinging, waving a flyer over her head like a signal flag. She climbed into the truck and buckled herself in, and presented the flyer with both hands, which is how he knew it was serious. The spring fundraiser, a bake sale, the biggest one the school did all year. New books for the library, new equipment for the gym. I already wrote your name down, Nora said. Table 12. That was Mom's lucky number. He looked at the flyer for a long moment. There were plenty of reasons to say no, and she watched him not say any of them. What are we making? He asked, and her whole face came on like a porch light. That was the whole negotiation. It usually was. In the years since it had become just the two of them, Grady had developed exactly one unbreakable policy, and it was this. When Nora ran toward something with her whole chest, he did not stand in the doorway. He had stood in enough doorways for one lifetime. The school parent world had a way of reading him that he had stopped correcting. At drop-off, he was the truck with the ladder racks among the rows of clean crossovers. At parent nights, he was the man who came straight from a job in his work boots and sat in the back and left early, not because he did not care, but because a client's water heater did not care either. The room moms were polite to him the way people are polite to weather. He knew what the polite look meant. It meant somebody should really help that man. It had never once meant he might be fine. He was mostly fine. That was the part nobody had a category for. He kept a clean house, a full fridge, a braid tutorial bookmarked on his phone that he had practiced on a paintbrush until he got it right. Fine was a thing he had built, board by board, the same way he built everything else. It just did not photograph well from the pickup lane. At home, the evidence of their life was everywhere, and he never thought about it until a stranger stood in it. A kitchen counter he had built himself. Oak, sanded soft at the corner where Nora did her homework. A drawing on the refrigerator of 3 people, one of them drawn in yellow crayon and floating slightly above the other 2, because Nora had decided that was where her mother lived now. And on the shelf by the window, out of the reach of splatter but close enough to see, a small tin box with a hinged lid. He could cook from memory now, but he still could not open that box casually. He had to set his shoulders first, the way you do before you lift something heavy, even when the thing weighs less than a pound. Lauren had been a school librarian who baked the way other people sing, which is to say, constantly, unselfconsciously, and mostly for the joy of the people listening. Grady met her in 2011 when he was 23 and repairing water damage in the library of a school 2 towns over. She brought zucchini bread to the work crew on a Tuesday. He came back on Saturday to fix a shelf that was not broken. They married 2 years later. The reception was small, and the cake was hers, because she did not trust anyone else to do it, and she was right not to. Their whole courtship had run on that kitchen. He would frame houses all day and then sit on her counter stool all evening, watching her hands, learning nothing, because he was not watching to learn. She fed half the neighborhood without ever calling it anything. New baby on the street, casserole and cookies. Bad diagnosis 2 doors down, soup and shortbread, and no questions. She kept a running list on the refrigerator titled People Having a Year, and the list was never empty, and neither was the oven. He asked her once why she did it. She was crimping a crust when he asked, 2 knuckles and a thumb, and she did not look up. Because you can't fix most things, she said, but you can warm them. She had one rule in the kitchen, delivered with flour on her nose, and absolute conviction. Crust tells on you, she liked to say. Rushed hands, rushed crust. A pie knows if you were somewhere else the whole time. Nora was born in November of 2017. Lauren wrote the date on an index card and filed it in the tin box, between the peach pie and the molasses cookies, because she said that was where the important things lived. The diagnosis came in the fall of 2021. It was aggressive, and it did not negotiate. By March of 2022, there was a hospice room with a window that faced a parking lot, and Lauren, who had spent that whole terrible winter worrying about everyone else in the room, pointed at the future and gave him one instruction. Use the box, she said. Nora should grow up knowing what her mother's kitchen tasted like. You will burn everything for a year. Do it anyway. She was right about that, too. He burned everything for a year. He set off the smoke alarm so many times that Nora, 4 years old, learned to open the back door and wave a dish towel at the ceiling like a tiny air traffic controller. He ruined pans. He produced a banana bread with the approximate density of a paving stone and a batch of molasses cookies that the dog next door refused gently, the way dogs refuse things when they love you. There were nights he stood over another tray of failure at 11 o'clock with his eyes stinging, and not from the smoke, because the burnt sugar smell was the smell of losing her twice. A man who could read a level to a 64th of an inch could not, for the better part of a year, make butter and flour agree with him, and the unfairness of it felt personal, but he did it anyway. Sunday afternoons, the two of them, the box open on the counter, Lauren's handwriting telling them what to do. Cream the butter longer than you think. Cold hands for crust. Do not rush. And one Sunday in the spring of 2023, an apple pie came out of that oven, and it was right. Not close. Right. Nora took one bite and went very quiet, and then said, "It tastes like Mom's." And the two of them sat on the kitchen floor and cried. And the pie got cold, and it was still the best either of them had eaten in a year. After that, the box was a bridge instead of a wound. He worked through it card by card, season by season. All except one. The peach pie. Her masterpiece, the one she made every August. The one with a note at the bottom of the card in smaller handwriting, like a secret. He had picked that card up a dozen times. He had never once preheated the oven for it. Some part of him had decided that as long as one recipe stayed unbaked, some part of her was still ahead of him, still waiting, and he was not ready to catch up. So that was the man in the folding chair. That was who Bianca Crane looked at and saw sawdust. One van, no wife. And that was who the stranger in the coat looked at in the parking lot after the meeting when she caught up to him beside his truck with her hand out. "Mara," she said, "I work in food." "Grady, I work in everything else." She laughed, one short, real laugh, like it had gotten away from her. Up close she had floor-white threads of early silver in dark hair and the kind of tired eyes that come from reading spreadsheets about things that used to be fun. He put her at about his age and did not wonder much past that, because a person who stands up for you in a cafeteria has already told you the important thing about themselves. "You didn't have to do that in there," he said. "I know," she said. "I was going to sit quietly and be nobody tonight. It's harder than it looks." She nodded at his truck, at the ladder racks, at his hands. "I meant it about the apron. I'm free Saturdays. If Table 12 will have me." "Table 12 is a corner of my kitchen and a kid who narrates," he said. "It's a small kitchen." "Small kitchens are where the good ones learn," Mara said, like it was a fact she had checked personally. The first Saturday, she showed up in jeans and a plain gray apron, worn soft, the strings wrapped twice and tied in front. And he noticed it the way a carpenter notices somebody else's broken-in tool belt. She did not touch anything without asking. She stood at the end of the counter with her sleeves rolled and watched him work through Lauren's shortbread, and something in how she watched was different from how a neighbor watches. She watched his hands the way his crew watched a master framer, like she was reading. He creamed the butter longer than seemed reasonable because the card said to. He chilled the dough twice because the card said to. When he crimped the test crust, He did it with 2 knuckles and a thumb, a little hooked motion, unhurried, and Mara went still for a second, and he did not see it. "Who taught you that?" she asked. "My wife wrote these," he said, and tapped the tin box gently, the way you touch a photograph. "I just try not to let them down." She read the card he slid across, the loops of the handwriting, the margin notes. "Nora says more cinnamon. She is wrong, but let her." Mara read it twice. When she looked up, her eyes had changed weather. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then we won't let them down." Nora orbited the kitchen all morning, narrating, taste testing, assigning both adults jobs with the serene authority of a foreman. Mara took orders from an 8-year-old without a flicker of condescension, and Grady, watching her fold flour like it was a language she was born in, thought, "She has done this before. Somewhere, a lot." He did not ask. People got to keep their own stories. He, of all people, knew that. Once her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it and stepped out onto the porch. He heard just a piece of it through the screen door, a voice pitched low and businesslike, a sentence about paperwork, something about a grant. "Keep my name off it, Iris. That's the whole point." Then she came back in, put the phone face down on the windowsill, and asked Nora what her job was. "Sprinkles inspector," Nora said. "Then inspect me," Mara said, and held out the tray. The second Saturday, she arrived with a bag of peaches from a farm stand 2 counties over, out of season and expensive, and waved off the question before he could ask it. They worked the sale list front to back that morning. Shortbread by the 100. The molasses cookies doubled because Nora had run a poll at school with a clipboard of her own and reported strong molasses sentiment in the 3rd grade. Mara moved through his small kitchen like water finding old channels, and twice he caught her doing something with her hands, a little unconscious efficiency, a baker's fold, a tap of the bench scraper that did not belong to a woman who merely worked in food. She caught him catching her. 15 years behind a desk, she said, by way of explanation that explained nothing. The hands hold a grudge. Against the desk? Against me, she said lightly, and the lightness had a floor under it, and he let it be. People got to keep their own stories. What she asked about instead all morning was Lauren. Not carefully, the way most people asked, with their voices already lowered for the funeral. Curiously, what did she bake at Christmas? What did she listen to while she worked? Which recipes had failed, ever, even once? Grady answered and kept answering, and realized somewhere in the second hour that he was laughing while he did it, telling the story about the paving stone banana bread, and that the telling did not hurt anywhere. It was the first time in 4 years that Lauren had been in the kitchen as a joy and not a weight. The coffee he poured her went cold on the counter, untouched, both Saturdays, because her hands were always in something. He noticed that too. What he did not see was Mara Ellsworth sitting in her parked car afterward, both hands on the wheel, not driving, looking at a smear of flour on her sleeve like it was a postcard from a country she had grown up in and had not visited in 15 years. Bianca Crane, meanwhile, had discovered that Grady had not gone away and set about correcting it. It arrived politely, the way these things do. An email about vendor certification forms that no other table had been asked to fill out. A reminder about a table fee quoted at $40, which turned out to be a number that existed nowhere in the fundraiser's paperwork. A follow-up questioning whether home kitchens were really appropriate for a school event, sent to a committee of people who had all, without exception, signed up to bake in home kitchens. He filled out the forms He paid the fee. He replied to the committee email with one line, confirming his oven temperature ran true, and attached nothing, explained nothing, defended nothing. He had learned this from years of difficult clients. The person trying to make you quit needs your help to do it. All you have to do is not supply any. He said nothing further, and his saying nothing seemed to bother her more than a fight would have. People like Bianca kept score in reactions. He was bankrupting the game by declining to play. Then, 9 days before the sale, the table map went up on the gym doors, and table 12 was not his anymore. His name had been moved to a corner near the loading doors, out past the utility curtain, beside the rolling dumpsters that lived behind the gym. The word on the map said logistics. Denny Vasquez found him reading it at pickup. Denny was a big, cheerful man who coached the third-grade soccer team and had strong opinions about justice. He read the map and read it again, and his ears went red. "You gonna let her do that?" "It's a bake sale, Denny," Grady said. "Nora gets one childhood. I'm not going to spend it in a parking lot arguing with a clipboard. It's not right." "Lots of things aren't," Grady said, and meant it without bitterness, which is a trick that takes years of practice. Bianca herself made one appearance on the subject, gliding past him at Thursday pickup with two of the room moms in formation behind her. "You understand," she said, not really stopping. "We just want the entrance tables to look, complete. Family, complete." She let that sit exactly long enough. "You'll be great by the doors. People love a surprise on their way out." He watched her go. In his chest, something old and tired lifted its head, and he put his hand on it, quietly, and it lay back down. Nora came running across the blacktop with a painting of a pie, and that settled it. He was going to the corner, and he was going to be glad to be there. Mara heard about the move on the second Saturday from Nora, who reported it as breaking news with editorial comment. He watched Mara's jaw set, watched her pick up her phone, watched her thumb hover. "Let it be," he said. "Grady." "She gets the tables," he said. "We get the ovens. I like our half of that trade." She looked at him for a long moment, the way you look at a load-bearing wall you have just discovered in a house you thought you knew. Then she put the phone down and picked up the rolling pin. And if she rolled that batch a little harder than the dough strictly required, nobody said anything. The night before the sale, the house went quiet at 9, and Grady stood in the kitchen alone with the lights low and almost quit. It came over him the way doubt comes over careful men, not loudly, just thoroughly. He saw the map on the gym door. He saw the corner by the dumpsters, the utility curtain, the smallest font. He saw Nora standing behind a table nobody walked past, holding a cash box with nothing in it, learning a lesson about the world he had spent 8 years trying to postpone. He had his phone in his hand. The withdrawal email was 2 sentences long in his head, and very reasonable. Instead, he put the phone in a drawer, which was a thing he did at exactly the moments the phone most wanted to be held, and he took down the tin box. He set his shoulders. He opened it, and for the first time in 4 years, he took out the peach pie card and laid it flat on the counter and left it there. Lauren's handwriting, confident at the top, smaller at the bottom, where the secret lived. Some recipes are not instructions. They are letters. This one read like she had known someday he would be standing in this exact spot at this exact hour, deciding whether to be brave about something small, which is the only reliable rehearsal for being brave about something large. The note at the bottom of the card said, for when you need the room on your side. He read it twice and laughed once, wet and quiet, alone in the kitchen. Then he got out the flour. He worked past midnight. Cold hands for crust. He blanched and peeled the peaches the way the card said, saving the juice, wasting nothing. Somewhere in the second hour, Nora appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, drawn by the smell the way sailors are drawn by lighthouses, and he did not send her back to bed. He gave her one job, crimming practice, 2 knuckles and a thumb, on a strip of scrap dough, until her small hands found the little hooked motion her mother's hands had known. Like this? Exactly like that. She went back to bed, flour-dusted and satisfied, and he worked on, unhurried, because a pie knows if you were somewhere else the whole time, and he was nowhere else. He was entirely, completely there. Dawn found the kitchen full of cooling racks, 11 pies, 4 dozen shortbread, the molasses cookies that had once defeated him, all in ranks like a small army that smelled like a holiday. And at the end of the counter, set apart, 1 pie under a clean cloth, covered the way you cover something sacred. He texted Mara at 6, bringing something new tomorrow. Well, something old. The reply came back in under a minute, which told him she was awake too. Save me the first slice. Sale day was one of those bright May Saturdays that make gymnasiums look almost noble. The doors opened at 10. By 5 past, the entrance tables were arranged like a magazine spread, and Bianca Crane stood at the center of them wearing a headset she did not need, directing traffic that did not require direction. Grady's corner was past the utility curtain by the loading doors, where the light was worse, and the folding table wobbled until he shimmed it with a matchbook. Nora had made a sign at home, poster paint on butcher paper, crooked and magnificent. Mara taped it up, stepped back, and pronounced it better than any signage her people had ever produced. And she said, her people like a private joke he did not press on. For 10 minutes, nobody came. Then the smell got loose. It drifted out past the curtain the way rumors do, freely, ignoring the floor plan, and it found people. A grandfather followed it first, cup of coffee in hand, moving with the unhurried certainty of a man who had smelled real crust before and knew there was no point pretending otherwise. He bought a whole pie. He came back 9 minutes later with his wife and bought a second one, and would not say what happened to the first. By 11, there was a line. It was a strange kind of line for a school gym, patient and good-humored, the kind that forms when word of mouth is doing the advertising. A teacher bought shortbread for the whole front office. The crossing guard, a man of few words in Grady's 4 years of mornings, bought molasses cookies, ate one standing there, and said, "Huh," which people who knew him understood to be a review of considerable length. 2 8th graders pooled their money for a pie and carried it out of the gym with the ceremony of pallbearers. By 11:30, the line went past the curtain and out into the gym proper, bending along the wall like a river finding its level, directly past the entrance tables and their magazine spread. Denny Vasquez appointed himself box fairy and crowd control, gleefully announcing the specials like a ballpark vendor. Mara worked the table with her sleeves rolled, boxing shortbread, making change from the cash box, moving with an efficiency that made the whole corner run like a shop that had been open for years. Grady mostly handed things to people and watched his daughter explain over and over to anyone who asked, and several who did not, that the recipes were her mom's, that her mom's number was 12, and that the cinnamon amount was her personal contribution. Nobody who heard it walked away without buying something. Several people bought things and then stood off to the side for a minute, being quietly rearranged. From across the gym, Bianca watched the line bend the wrong way, and her headset found nothing to say about it. The pies sold out at noon. The shortbread went by 1:30. At 1, when Principal Okonkwo climbed the little stage by the scoreboard to announce totals and hand out the paper certificates, Grady's table was bare, except for crumbs, Nora's sign, and one covered pie he had not sold because it had never been for sale. The awards were Bianca's moment, and she conducted them accordingly. Certificates for participation. A special thanks to the entrance tables, by name, hers among them. And then the introduction she had clearly rehearsed for the fundraiser's guest judge, a distinguished friend of the school whose identity she had been keeping warm all day like a pastry in a proofing box. Except that somewhere in the middle of it, reading her own index card, Bianca actually looked at the woman climbing the stage steps and recognized her, not from the school, but from a magazine. Her face did the thing faces do when two pieces of information collide at speed. "Ms. Ellsworth," she said, recovering, upgrading her smile. "Mara Ellsworth, of Ellsworth's 48 Bakeries." She laughed, a bright hostess laugh, and gestured vaguely toward the utility curtain. Had we known, we would never have put a professional anywhere near our little charity corner. She got roped in by, well. A pause, a smile, one last small dismissal, spent from habit like a coin she assumed she still had. Our resident single dad, who apparently found himself a wife for the bake sale after all. A few people laughed. Fewer than before. Rooms learn faster than the people running them. Mara took the microphone the way she apparently did everything, without hurry and without waste. She thanked the school. She congratulated the volunteers. Then she looked down at the fund totals on the card Principal Okonkwo had handed her, and she did not read them the way they had been arranged. "Table 12, she said. "The one that got moved next to the dumpsters for logistics." She let the words sit in the rafters. That table out-earned every other table in this gymnasium combined. The room did not gasp so much as shift all at once, like a load settling. Chairs scraped. Heads turned toward the corner, where a man in a work jacket stood behind a bare table with flowers still on his forearms, holding his daughter's hand. "I judge pastry for a living," Mara went on. "I have eaten in 11 countries. I employ people with medals. And one pie today made me cry in a middle school parking lot." She paused, and her voice came down out of its polish. And what was underneath was plainer and truer. It was a peach pie. The crust was crimped by hand, 2 knuckles and a thumb the old way. My mother crimped like that. She had one shop, and I grew up behind her counter, and I have spent 15 years building a company that has everything except the thing that pie had. She looked straight at the corner. "So I would like to know where Table 12 learned it." Silence. Real silence. The kind gymnasiums are not built for. And Nora Holt, 8 years old, in a voice that carried like her mother's laugh, called out, "From my mom's box." Later, people who were there disagreed about many details, but not about that. Not about the whole room turning, or the man with flour on his arms who did not say a word, or the way the woman on stage looked at him across all those folding chairs, as if the fundraiser, the school, and the entire spring afternoon had rearranged themselves into a corridor with only one person at the end of it. Grady, for his part, looked at exactly one face in that gymnasium. Nora's. It was doing the porch light thing again. That was enough. The fallout arrived the way weather does after a front moves through, in gusts. And then, all at once, and then clearer air than anyone could remember. The parents came to the corner first, the same voices from the folding chairs 2 weeks earlier, now carrying compliments and phone numbers and requests. Was it too late to order for Memorial Day? Did he take orders at all? Had he ever thought about doing this professionally? He answered everyone the same way. No bitterness anywhere in him, which confused the people who had laughed and undid the ones who had only stayed quiet. Principal Okonkwo announced the final total from the stage before the room emptied. The biggest single-day fundraiser in the school's history, by a margin that made her read the number twice. She found Grady afterward by the loading doors, shook his hand like a colleague, and looked at the bare table. The crooked sign, the corner. The corner did that, she said. I intend to remember it. And the way she said it suggested that certain committee assignments were going to look different next spring. And they did. Bianca came last. The headset was gone. Her formation of room moms had drifted off to other orbits, the way formations do when the gravity changes. She stood in front of the wobbly table for a moment, and to her credit, she did not perform. I was unkind, she said, in front of people, on purpose. She stopped and restarted, smaller. My mother ran our bake sales. I have been trying to run hers ever since. That is not an excuse. There isn't one. Grady looked at her, and then did the thing that everyone who stayed in that gym long enough to see still talks about. He uncovered the last pie, the one that had never been for sale, cut a slice, and handed it across the table on a paper plate. Napkins are on the left, he said. She stood there holding it, a woman who had arrived that morning running an entire gymnasium and was leaving with a paper plate and a lesson, and she nodded once, the way you nod when you understand exactly what has just been done to you, and how gently. The house that night was full of the particular tiredness that comes after good days, which is a different substance entirely from the other kind. Nora fell asleep at 8:30. Mid-sentence, a certificate with her name on it, thumbtacked over her bed. The kitchen still smelled like peaches. Grady washed the last pan slowly, dried his hands, and took down the tin box. He returned the peach pie card to its place between the date of Nora's birth and the molasses cookies. But first, at the bottom, under Lauren's smaller handwriting, he added a line of his own in pencil, the way she used to log the important occasions. Baked at last. May 16th, 2026. The room was on our side. Being proven right, he had learned, is not the same thing as being whole. The gym had turned. The line had bent his way. None of it returned 1 hour of the years, and none of it was the point. The point had been upstairs asleep since 8:30, and the point had crimped a strip of scrap dough with 2 knuckles and a thumb. And somewhere in that midnight kitchen, his grief had finally handed something forward instead of just holding on. Mom's number 1, Nora had said, in the truck on the way home, matter of fact, watching the streetlights. It usually does, he said. It just takes its time. He closed the box gently. It made its small tin sound. And for the first time in 4 years, the sound was only a sound and not an ache. The box had stopped being the last of her. It had become, at some point between a cafeteria and a gymnasium, the part of her that was still teaching. Mara came back the following Saturday. No judging, no title, no reason anyone could point to. Just a gray apron, worn soft, at 9 in the morning. She kept coming. Saturdays became a fixed point, the way real things become fixed without anyone announcing it. She learned where the pans lived. She lost 3 consecutive arguments with Nora about cinnamon and called it market research. She never once, in all those mornings, made his kitchen feel small, and he began to understand that this was a skill, maybe her best one, learned behind a counter in one shop a long time before there were 48. In June, she asked him for a bid, contractor to founder, on the build-out of her new flagship shop downtown. He walked the empty space with his tape measure and his notebook, while she stood in the middle of the bare concrete watching him work. And there was something in her face, like the thing from the first Saturday, the reading look. "I've hired 100 bakers," she said. "I've never once watched anyone bake like it was a way of keeping someone. I'd like the room the ovens live in to be built by somebody who builds like that too." He gave her a fair price. She argued it up, which he had not known was a thing that could happen, and lost the argument on purpose and hired him anyway. That same month, the school board's summer agenda carried a line item nobody could trace: a fully funded culinary classroom for Maple Row, ovens and all, from an anonymous donor, care of a foundation named for somebody's mother. Grady read about it in the newsletter, looked at Mara across the counter, and said nothing, because people got to keep their own stories. She caught him looking anyway. "Sprinkles, Inspector," she said, holding out the tray. "Inspect me." The romance, when it finally admitted what it was, did it quietly, without a single grand gesture, which was the only way either of them would have trusted it. A hand over a cooling rack, not quite held, and then, one Saturday, held. 2 coffees that finally got drunk while they were still hot, on a porch, after Nora was asleep. He was out of practice and said so. She said she had never had the practice to be out of, and that between them, that probably averaged out to normal. By the time the flagship opened in the fall, with oak counters sanded soft at the corners, there was a hook by his kitchen door where 2 aprons hung. His canvas, paint-flecked. Hers gray, worn soft, strings wrapped twice. Some stories in that town got told all summer, and this one kept its shape better than most. The bake sale where the clipboard moved a man to the dumpsters, and the gym came to the dumpsters anyway. The next spring, the sign-up sheet for the fundraiser went up in the same cafeteria, and the first line was filled in before the tape was dry. Table 12, Holt. In ink this time, in an adult's hand, with a small addition in a child's pencil underneath, an inspector. Nobody argued about the table. Nobody mentioned napkins. Bianca Crane, who ran nothing that year and seemed lighter for it, signed up 2 lines down for lemon bars, and they were, everyone agreed, genuinely good. On the morning of the sale, in a kitchen that smelled like August in the middle of May, a man with flour on his forearms lifted the cloth off a peach pie, while a woman in a gray apron packed the truck, and a girl with her mother's laugh supervised them both. Nobody at that table had needed a wife. They had needed to be seen. And the seeing had taken its time, the way the best things out of that oven always did. Neither of them had been looking for this. They had only been keeping a promise to someone else, and the promises, it turned out, had been keeping them.